Jared, I mean, it was quite the commitment for you to fly all the way out to Texas and to show up to the baseball owners' meetings uninvited. So, as you got the idea and to ultimately, booking the tickets and doing the travel, what kind of made your mind up that you were actually going to do this?
Well, that was easy because I didn't have to make up my mind. It was Jorge Leon decided to go
Okay,
from president of the Oakland
right.
68s. And me and Gabe Cullen, who are co-directing the documentary Summer of Sell, we just followed him out there. So if he didn't go, we probably would not have gone because he's kind of one of the main focal points or focal characters in the story that we've been following.
But it is a little intimidating, right?
Yeah.
To show up to something where who knows how they might treat you. Also, I can't imagine it was cheap. I'm guessing $1,000 at least for what, a day, 2 days?
Yeah, there was it was 2 nights
Okay.
and a few favors thrown in to help us cover costs and stuff. But we weren't sure where the meetings were going to take place. And
Hmm.
so we were calling around and we got a few tips. And we ended up our first night was at the Gaylord Texan Resort Hotel, which is like basically a big building that encloses Disneyland. It's just enormous. And we went there our first day and no one was there. And then but we also had some tips that it was over at the Live by Lowe's. So the next morning, 7 a.m., we were in an Uber on our way over to the next place where we also had a room. And we showed up and had breakfast. We're walking around and got shut down going into one of the rooms or one of the levels.
Hmm.
And as we turned to walk down the stairs, I turned around to Gabe and Jorge and went, ding, ding. I think we found it.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to ask. So
Yeah.
once you showed up to the hotel, there was the chance that maybe security would say, "Look, we see your shirts. We know you're not here as an invited guest, or even part of the credentialed media." Which, by the way, I wasn't even invited into
Yeah.
that section. But did they treat you okay? Were you able to get to where you wanted to be and do what you wanted to do?
Yeah, so we were expecting that. And so we kind of flew in or drove in stealth mode. I stepped out of the Uber and then realized I had my A's hat on and quickly pulled it off, shoved it in my
Hmm.
pocket. And we walked in just like guests and checked into our room and then went down, surveyed the area. And after breakfast, we were just going to wander around and take some pictures, kind of scoping things out. We had a big media book so we could match faces of
I was going to ask
media
about that.
journalists. Yeah. So we had a book that had all of the media journalists that we thought might be there and their pictures of that we found so we could say, okay, that's who you are. And then there's another book of just the owners, each owner with the name and their team that they owned and a rough picture of who they might be.
And
So
probably a dated picture too, because we all have the dated
mhm.
headshots. But and I want to make sure we this is spelled out. This is
Yeah.
not to be some creepy thing you're going to approach them in
Mhm.
an awkward way. You just wanted to make sure that if you had the opportunity to have a moment with them, you knew who they were, you could put your best foot forward so that you were prepared for the opportunity, right? It
Exactly.
could sound sketch if I didn't know exactly what I think you were trying to do, you know?
Yeah, and so we didn't want to be going in there with the assumption that we were going to tackle the owner and says vote no.
Right, right. It had to be
So
had to be done the right
yeah,
way. Okay. Okay.
so we kind of wandered around and we met some reporters from a Japanese network and talked with them a bit, and they were the ones that first got shut down with cameras in the lobby, and
Okay.
they had press credentials and everything.
Right.
And we decided we're like, you know what, I think they've made out that we're not just people there for whatever. And so like let's go up and suit up. And so we went up, put our stay shirts on and
Right.
like made it known. And I had my camera with me and we walked down. And then that's kind of when they cornered us in or they approached us in the lobby and told us that we can't we weren't allowed to film or anything. We weren't allowed to protest or whatever. They even told us there's a peaceful protest location across the street, which happened to just be a construction site. And so we're like, okay.
For all three of you, by the way, not 30 or
Yeah.
300, just three of you. And
So,
I should also say you have your camera because you're working on the documentary. We'll get to all of that. I hope people recognize you from that already. But yeah, you were there to try and accomplish something, a message, and maybe document and capture this. And so I do obviously want to get to your all interaction with John Fisher in a second. Maybe we can separate that. But
sure.
Who else did you talk to? Who else were the conversations with, and maybe what you gained?
Yeah. So the first people we talked to was some writers. So John Shea with San Francisco Chronicle, Bob Nightingale, USA Today. Is it Mike Silverton from Boston Globe? And so they were the first people to introduce themselves to us. And then from there, owners that we talked to, was it Larry Bear from the Giants? I think Jorge was kind of from 68. He was kind of the point person because he was, I guess you could say, performing for us for the documentary as best he could.
It was his story to tell, his journey.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. And so he did most of the talking with owners, but I know he talks Giants owner, the Chicago Cubs. I forget his I forget his last name.
Ricketts.
There's Tom Ricketts.
Yeah.
So we met Tom Ricketts. The Yankees, and there's a few others that I remember. The Cardinals owner was one where we saw him get out of his car, grab his bag. He's a much older guy, drags everything in himself, and we're like, man, this guy he's just doing it.
I respect that.
Yeah, we're like, I like this guy. He's pretty cool. And he said hi to us as we walked by, gave a smile and a nod.
And they can see at this point, like, you've got the Stay shirts in green and gold. Like, it's pretty clear they know what you're there for, who you are and what you're there for.
Exactly. Okay. And so we didn't want to cause a scene and make them despise us. So we figured our shirts would say enough. Okay. They know what the reason why we would be there.
Fair enough.
And if we had the opportunity to talk to them, maybe state our case or hand them a gift or something. And we had a few of the boxes left over from that were mailed out by the mayor.
Got it.
The week before. And so we were looking for the people that those boxes were for, and we're going to hand it to them. And so it's just trying to be cordial and show that we're there to support our team.
And through the commentary or even the body language that you had in these interactions, is the feeling that at least owners and the media members, they understood you, if maybe even could appreciate you, or they didn't vote that way, but they might have even agreed with you? How did you sense the chemistry there?
The one that stood out the most was the Cubs owner, Ricketts. He stopped and he turned and just looked at us, and you could see almost an apology in his eyes. He's like, I'm sorry, guys. And it looked as though his apology really hurt. Like he knew he couldn't do anything about it, or the decision was made.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It came across as though maybe he was on our side, but just couldn't change it or couldn't go against the grain for whatever reason. And so that was the one that stood out the most to me. The other fact is there's a lot of people there that either worked in the front office or were the other owners, and they thought we had a fairly decent case and had their own questions. Like, I don't know, why is this going to get pushed through? So there is walking away. There was like a little bit of a sense of like, there's whatever we did wasn't going to matter. But at the same time, it also added a hint of confusion. It was like, what is going on here? It's like, I walked away that night thinking like something is bigger than just a vote. Something's happening behind the scenes that nobody knows about.
And to be clear, if you three didn't show up, nobody would have. And there would have been at least no message. I mean, you were the symbol of opposition to what was about to happen here. And you say you kind of had a sense. What was your sense of what you thought was brewing? Expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure, because I don't know what was happening behind the
Mm-hmm.
scenes. It just felt like something was happening behind the scenes, and no matter what we did, they
Mm-hmm.
had made up their decision, no matter how much evidence we showed them.
Yeah.
And that's probably what confused me the most, was like, you've got this evidence. What do you know that we don't know?
Right. Right.
And what backroom deals have you made that is going to benefit you that maybe isn't the best for baseball and the fans? So it just left a lot of questions in that regard.
So eventually you have the interaction with John Fisher. And by the way, I think you know this, you're one of so very few who have conversed, especially in person, had the chance to say anything that gets a response and vice versa. So how does it work? You three are standing there. Did he approach you? Did you move to him? Like physically, how does the interaction start?
Well, it started when we looked up and saw Dave Cavill we were standing at the bar, and he was walking to the restaurant. And as he's walking, he glances over and slows his pace as he stares at these 3 stay shirts over by the bar, and then continues on. And we're like, well, that's probably all who's going to show up. And about 5 minutes later, we looked up, and John Fisher's walking towards the restaurant bar area
To meet him, probably.
yeah, just to whatever. And say Greg Johnson, the chairman of the Giants, met him in the hallway, or met him outside the bar, and moves him over behind a pillar. And I'm like, whoa, yeah, he's probably gonna see us and run away. And so next thing we know is his head pops off to the side, just like looks at us and pops back behind the pillar. And then he walks off into the restaurant. That was it. About, I don't know, a minute or two later, he comes back with Greg Johnson, walks all the way around to where we're at, and basically comes up and introduces himself and says, "Hey guys, yeah, he came to us."
You stayed put. You stayed put the entire time.
Yeah. We never engaged him. He came and engaged us.
Okay.
And so he came up, and his first thing he said after he shook all our hands, it goes, "I appreciate your passion." And then
And how long, I mean, I do want to get into that part too, but
sure.
If you're estimating, and sometimes when you're anticipating something to happen and you lose track of time, like 2 minutes, or actually like 2 minutes feels like 5 seconds, or 5 seconds feels like 2 minutes. But how long do you actually think what happened lasted with you guys?
I've heard some of the other guys that were there were saying like 10, 15 minutes. It was probably closer to like 5.
Oh, okay.
I would say.
See what I'm saying, though? Like, nobody really, because it's so highly anticipated and everybody's adrenaline is going. He saw you, vice versa. So, okay. So, but a certain amount of minutes, not like a minute, at least multiple minutes to be sure. Did it feel tense? I mean, he clearly knows you three are there to oppose everything that he's bound to do and has been working very hard on. So is there awkwardness in that sense, or is there true, genuine appreciation? Like he said he appreciated you for being there.
Yeah, and the first thing that was said after he said that, Jorge said, "Hi, I'm Jorge, president of the Oakland 68s." And his first response was, "Yeah, I know who you are. I know what you've been doing." And so he's very aware of who the Oakland 68s are and all of their efforts with the Sell the Team movement and everything. So that was no surprise to him, and that we were there. But the conversation was pretty calm and low key. It helps that there was a bunch of reporters there making notes to write into their articles that would get released a few moments later.
So you guys were surrounded by media because they saw what was unfolding, a conversation between the A's owner and fans who were there to oppose it.
Almost. We were actually all at the bar having drinks with all of the media. The media was there with a few of front office people from other teams. It was basically, we were surrounded by front office workers or front office executives, and a couple owners were over there. And we were just having conversation, talking about baseball, and maybe every once in a while bring up why we were there. But it was just a normal random conversation. And then when he came over, it was John Shea and Bob Nightingale were the two reporters that were there.
Mm-hmm.
And they were friends with all the other front office guys and knew them and were having conversations. But once it started and they introduced, we just started talking about our love for the game, love for the team. Jorge made a comment, said, I wrote a letter to the A's when I was in high school about reasons why they should stay in Oakland. And goes, oh yeah, goes, that was 1998. So I've been on this for a long time. And then Gabe, the other director, reminded John Fisher about his investment into the Giants to keep the Giants in the Bay, and how that's kind of the same situation with the A's, and that the A's should stay in the Bay, and he can do the same thing for them as he did for the Giants. And it was just small little conversations like that. Okay. And then it ended with that big moment of John Fisher saying, like, hey, I've been working on this for 18 years and it's a lot harder for me than it is for you. And then I made my last comment of, hey, can I ask you one more question, as I'm trying to figure out the question in my head. He goes, oh, it's never just one question. I got to go. And I was like, I just wanted to ask you what Oakland had to do to get you to come back to the table. So I wasn't
no answer to that one, right?
Yeah, we asked him if he would come back to the table and talk with Oakland. That was early in the conversation. Yeah, and okay. His response was like, nah, whatever. So
when he said the headline quote that everybody took away, and again, I'm 1,000+ miles away reading this, following it along like everybody else. I've had it harder than you. What was it exactly again?
I think I've had it much harder than you.
So
I believe something along the. Bob's got the right quote.
And I mean, that's the thing. Like the quote is the quote, and black and white is black and white. But what in that moment did you interpret it as? The reaction people gave it, which was not really good. Did it really sink in how that would be responded to when it ultimately got repeated? Or did you think twice about it in the very moment? Or how did it actually come across, not so much written, but actually said to you?
Yeah, so everyone, I'm sure you've talked to a lot of the people who have done interviews with him in the past few months, and they always say he's a very genuine individual, and his tone is very kind. He does have a very kind tone. It sounds very genuine, but then some of the things that he says doesn't match what's on public record or the facts that have been released through other outlets, and it makes you kind of like, wait, am I hearing what I am hearing? And he had just let off that statement with, I've spent the last 18 years trying to get something done. And I think it's hard to tell if he was talking specifically about building a new stadium or building a new stadium in Oakland.
Right.
And that kind of makes you, I don't know, shift a little and goes, really, 18 years you've been bouncing all over trying to leave Oakland quite a bit. But that was the first thing I'm like, that doesn't sound entirely accurate, what you just said. And then he follows with that comment of, it's been a lot harder for me than it has been for you. And it to me, I was like, I think you're just trying to make yourself out as the martyr. But did I really just hear that? And then reading through the articles, I go, I did hear that.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I know that all of the stuff that was shared was kind of much more reserved, but it was kind of the feeling that I felt when I heard that.
So, and I can tell you, I've been part of media sessions before. Somebody says something, it catches your ear a little bit when it comes out, but when you see the reaction to it, when it gets published or broadcasted afterwards, then you can really fully digest, okay, this is the public sentiment and response, and it's not very good. What was your, I guess, later that day, that night, last question on this topic, what was the takeaway from having that interaction? Did that make your whole trip worth it? Was that just a small part of it? Did you think it went as good as you possibly could have had it? How did you feel about everything, the 5 minutes or so
Yeah.
5 hours later.
My biggest regret was I didn't just ask my question because I wish I had that ready at the tip of my tongue. But for the most part, I think we were happy that we actually got to talk to John Fisher as like the elusive man.
Yeah,
being able to actually
it's
talk
amazing.
to him was something. But yeah, one thing is it didn't fully end there. We had one other interaction with him later that hasn't been talked about a whole bunch in media because it was kind of just us. Maybe, I don't know, that might get revealed in the documentary down the road, but it felt like we had actually accomplished one of the big tasks, and that was to find John Fisher and tell him, like Jorge's goal was, I just want to tell him, do the right thing. And that's the thing that he kept on saying every time he would see John, he'd go, hey, do the right thing. And to the end where his last interaction as he was leaving the restaurant, because we had a table that was next to him after that whole bit. Yeah, he was leaving and Jorge goes, hey, do the right thing. Do the right thing. And then from what I believe it was John or Bob said that they were watching him as he left, he turned to a table and said, I am doing the right thing. So it obviously gets under his skin in some way. I'm not totally sure how much, but yeah. It
wasn't a cordial response of, hey, we'll laugh it off. There was something to it. Yeah.
Okay. To us, it was cordial, laugh it off and wave, all smiles. So he came across as trying to be a very friendly individual.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'll switch gears then to the documentary because I obviously want to talk about that. So, were you recording any of this? Not the actual interactions, or were you not allowed to do that because the hotel wouldn't let you? Will any of this be in the actual documentary?
Yeah. So we were shut down pretty early with our cameras, and so we were being selective on how much we pulled out our phones. And
welcome to media, by the way. Welcome to my world.
Yeah. And so there was some stuff that we were able to grab, being a little incognito and stuff, and some post interviews like right there, then and there.
Right.
But our big thing is, as soon as the night wrapped, we pulled out our cameras in the hotel room and we tried to recount everything.
Talk to each other. Interview. Absolutely. Yeah. It's a good thing.
And so we have a good long interview with Jorge as he just goes through beat by beat of what he remembers happening that hour or so beforehand. So
I know you were part of putting together the 10-minute clip that got sent out to the owners in the gift box as part of the USB drive. What's next? I mean, I know you have been working so hard on the documentary. Did we catch up in June? I think it was June is when we did our interview. But then I think I was one of the earlier ones to do an interview because I see you interviewing the mayor and pretty much everybody else, big figures, involved in this process. So what's the ultimate bigger release? You have so much material. You've let out that important 10-minute clip. I've seen bits and pieces elsewhere. What's the process on this?
Well, when I first started, it was the goal of let's get something to the owners, see if it will have any effect. As we can tell, it didn't, but at least it's a memory captured for all of the fans. So that was the task number one. That one's done. We have massive amounts of footage of following fans all throughout the season, and we're following this basically until we can find a conclusion to the story. And we'll be piecing it together, but it will be a full feature-length film. We're working on getting some production companies to join us and partner with us to help fund the post-production side of things, because as you know, there's a lot of licensing fees. Like
it ain't cheap. Yep.
So that's a big thing, and being able to also, because it might not be something that MLB wants to participate in, then we have to come up with creative ways around that. Make sure there's legal involved to make sure we're not.
You got to do it the right way. No, and
exactly.
I could sense you were doing that from the very beginning. And I'll say this. I mean, people ask, why do you make all these YouTube videos? Why do you cover this so intimately? Well, number one, it's part of my job, and a team I've been involved with now for multiple decades, and it's interesting to a lot of people. I also think this story is undercovered in a lot of regards as opposed to every other sports team and entity in the Bay Area. But I also feel like documenting what happens here is at least powerful from a historical standpoint, like down the road, to look back and really recount and recall what happened. I mean, I did a lot of research about the Giants' potential move to Tampa Bay, and there's just not a lot that still exists out there. The coverage was on broadcast television. It wasn't always recorded. It definitely always didn't get uploaded, so there's not much material. This stuff, I mean, from the earliest videos in April to here in November and beyond, the videos will live forever, and you can see the kind of like the process of it. So I guess my question is that the same reason why you chose to do a documentary? Because you felt powerful, at least in the documenting what happened side of it? I know it's your background, but there does seem like there's a value in that.
Yeah, no, there definitely is a value. First and foremost, I'm an A's fan and grew up an A's fan. And the fact that this happened, I figured it was something I could do, because I always looked at all these people that were doing like the state legislative stuff and going through the government side of things.
We're not lawyers, are we?
Yeah. I've learned more about law in the past 6 months than ever. And so, yeah, it's like all of this stuff. I felt like I couldn't do much, but I did know how to piece pictures together in a sequence to tell a story. I'm like, well, I'm going to at least throw my hat in that regard. And then Gabe Colin, who's the other co-director, he had been working on developing something and popped in around August, September that, hey, I'm going to be doing a documentary. And everyone's like, oh, Jared's already working on something. And so we connected and he had a bunch of producers connected. I had like one producer was interested in helping me and all this footage. And it was just, we started at different points and meeting and figured, it would make sense to work together and get the story told properly. And so that's when we combined forces and figured like, hey, this is the best case scenario is two A's fans that grew up in the area want to tell the story because that's what we know how to do.
Yeah.
So
love it. All right. Last thing, and I'll kind of switch gears for it. You're a longtime A's fan, right? Maybe your entire life. Sure, you have plenty of friends and family also in that same predicament. What do you expect Oakland A's fans and support to be or to not be like for 2024, based on how things stand right now? What do you predict next year to even be like at the Coliseum and beyond?
Well, seeing as how loud everything was this last year, and speaking with the Oakland 68s and other fan groups like the Last Dive Bar, the sentiment is that you thought we were loud last year or this last season. Just wait till next season. And I think there's a high probability that the passion of those A's fans is just going to increase, but maybe not so much in the way the A's organization would like them to. They might not pack a stadium. They might pack the parking lot across the street.
Got it.
There's a high probability that if the A's end up playing it, at the Giant Stadium, that the Giants and the A's fans might not show up to those games. So there's it. I'm surprised. I probably shouldn't be, but I've been rather surprised with the organization efforts and the collaboration that the A's fans have, and how successful they've been in organizing things. And so I could see that going up to another notch, and in the next season, it might be really dead at the Coliseum unless things switch. If something happens, maybe that they'll pack in.
Well, and the developments of public funding down there, that's not a done deal yet. I think by this summertime, we'll have a really good idea. July, basically, have a really good idea of where that's headed. I looked up the definition, and I can't remember it exactly, of what crestfallen is, and I felt like maybe that's how A's fans would feel, like just depleted. I'm done, and I do probably expect that some might feel that way, but it's interesting to hear you say, no, it's the exact opposite. The result of the efforts might look that way, but that maybe all of this only amplified the feelings. So interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's going to be a huge push to help fund schools over stadiums, and trying to get all of their funding ins to help bring that referendum to the ballot. And it's like, that's one thing we covered with the last game, home game of the season. There's a big, I don't know how much was covered on the broadcast, but there was a big, huge sign rolled out in right field as the big flag.
Oh, we saw it. We saw it. It stopped the game. The umpire had to say, "Hey, hang on, that's hanging over the fence, guys. Get it back. Get it back on the other side of the fence." And I was like, "What does that sign even say?" And then it became apparent. Oakland will never quit. Is that right?
Oakland will never quit. Yeah. And I think that's the sentiment, that they're not going to give up until shovels are in the ground. And if shovels are in the ground, then it's the passion's going to go elsewhere. And I don't think it will go to MLB. So there's been lots of talks of people saying, yeah, if you're going to leave, we're done too. So,
Jared, real quick, give a plug to where people can follow progress on the documentary.
Super easy. summerofcelldocumentary.com.
Oh, yeah. Well, it doesn't get easier than that, literally. Hey, I appreciate the time. And really appreciate your efforts in all of this. And like I said, obviously, making your voice heard, but especially the opportunity to document history as it happens. I think you were quick on this. You made the right call and doing what you are best at in life. So thank you for doing that, and thanks for coming on here.
Of course.